Let's dive right into an explainer of an incredible journey that completely redefines the very meaning of the word underdog. Today, we're exploring a story that honestly sounds like it was written for Hollywood, but is entirely grounded in reality. We're talking about the life of Henry Royce. When we talk about massive success, we typically just see the final product, right? That gleaming emblem of achievement. But to truly understand the absolute heights of that success, we really have to look at the depths from which it sprang. Born into a bankrupt milling family, Henry Royce literally started his journey at the absolute bottom. So how does a poor boy who sold newspapers just to survive end up creating the world's most luxurious car empire? We're exploring this massive gap between where Henry Royce started and what he ultimately achieved. Think about the sheer physics of this trajectory for a second. At just 9 years old, his father passed away, forcing him out onto the gritty streets of 1870s London. He spent his days hawking daily newspapers and delivering telegrams, literally just to ensure he had something to eat that night. But then, on the other end of his life's timeline, you have an empire synonymous with the absolute zenith of wealth, power, and untouchable luxury. Processing that chasm completely defies statistics. But the answer to how he spanned that impossible distance? Well, it actually lies in the struggle itself. The contrast here is just staggering. Selling newspapers for sheer survival versus creating the Rolls-Royce luxury car empire. On one hand, you have the absolute chaos of the streets. The biting cold, the dirt, the constant noise, and just that deep, ever-present anxiety of mere survival. And on the other, Rolls-Royce. It represents pristine order, silent engineering, and perfect control. The really fascinating part of this story is how the chaos of his early life didn't break him. Instead, it became the exact raw material he used to forge a universe of total precision and absolute luxury. Part 1. Survival on the streets. 0. That is the exact amount of formal engineering education, financial backing, or safety net that Henry Royce started with. He had absolutely nothing. When we talk about self-made individuals today, they often start with at least a small loan, maybe a garage or a network. But a zero? A zero is also a completely blank slate. When you start at zero, every single step forward is hard-won progress. There's literally nowhere to go but up. And the desperation of having nothing creates this psychological engine that can run hotter and frankly longer than any inherited privilege ever could. Selling newspapers wasn't some after-school hobby. It was an act of sheer survival. Every single newspaper he sold, every telegram he delivered, was a desperate bid to survive the harsh realities of his youth. This was purely existential. If he didn't hustle, he didn't eat. That instinct, forged right there on the street corners, created a terrifying level of focus. And that exact same focus directly translated to his notorious, obsessive work ethic later in life. Decades later, his relentless drive to perfect his engineering would literally push him to the point of physical exhaustion. But it also resulted in unmatched mechanical perfection. The street vendor simply evolved into the obsessive engineer. Part 2. The spark of innovation. This timeline from year 1 as a poor boy selling newspapers through years of struggle focused purely on survival and into a future where he harnessed that survival instinct to build an empire really shows us something crucial. The ascent from the streets to an empire wasn't magic. It was a grueling, step-by-step transformation. The bridge from newspapers to engineering actually started with a brief, incredibly hard-won apprenticeship at the Great Northern Railway. But he didn't stop there. He taught himself electrical engineering by studying late into the night, eventually scraping together just enough to start a small dynamo business. He took that raw, desperate energy of his youth and completely redirected it into creation. Enduring those early years of struggle actively conditioned him to build and innovate without ever waiting for someone else's permission. Part 3. Forging the Empire. Creating the world's most luxurious car empire. Now, establishing the undisputed global standard for luxury requires massive audacity. The turning point actually happened when Royce bought a second-hand French DeCavall car. He was completely disgusted by it, the unreliability, the terrible vibrations, the poor construction. But instead of just complaining about it, he decided he could build a vastly better machine himself, right in his own corner shop. That right there is the true manifestation of his refusal to ever accept good enough. Because think about it, good enough on the streets meant starvation. In engineering, it meant failure. He demanded absolute perfection. Rolls-Royce, the world's most luxurious car empire, forged from the incredible journey of Henry Royce. When the aristocratic businessman Charles Rolls finally met the self-taught Henry Royce at the Midland Hotel in Manchester 1904, history was made. Rolls was so astounded by the engineering perfection of Royce's vehicle that they struck a historic deal on the absolute spot. The ultimate luxury brand was born directly from this unbelievable collision of high society and street-forged grit. So that iconic hood ornament doesn't just represent unimaginable wealth, it stands as a powerful monument to extreme resilience. Part 4. Lessons in Relentless Excellence. Pure survival instincts can fuel incredible journeys. Humble beginnings as a poor boy do not dictate your ceiling, and absolute grit can build the ultimate luxury. Henry Royce's life proves that the deepest struggles literally forge the highest levels of excellence. Those raw survival instincts aren't something to just leave behind. They are the high-octane fuel for an incredible journey. Starting with zero only defines your floor. It absolutely does not dictate your ceiling. Unrelenting grit is often the only tool strong enough to carve out extraordinary success. This entire philosophy is perfectly captured in Henry Royce's actual life motto: strive for perfection in everything you do. Take the best that exists and make it better. If Henry Royce could transform his desperate fight for survival into the Rolls-Royce empire, what incredible journey are you ready to begin? We've traced the path from a cold street corner to the absolute pinnacle of the automotive world. The raw materials Henry Royce used were poverty, desperation, and an unbreakable will to survive. Whatever your starting point is today, whatever seemingly impossible obstacles are standing in your way right now, consider them your own raw materials. The blueprint for an empire can be drawn from the absolute darkest of circumstances. So, the real question is, what incredible journey will you begin?